morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a look at that new Lugia. I told you that new Lugia looked awesome, but I also told you that that new Lugia looked awkward. And that if you were going to make a deck around it, you'd have to really try. And you'd have to build it very specifically, but it was probably going to be worth it if you could. Well, someone over in Japan has gone and done that, and they have gone and done a win, so I think it's probably about time that we had a little bit of a look at it. Now, starting off with Lugia here, what we really see, it's not the 2 energy 40, we don't care about that. It is 4 energy, 250 damage. Now, there's got to be a downside, and of course there is. The downside is that your opponent must have at least 6 cards in their hand. If they have got 5 or fewer cards in hand, this attack just literally does nothing. It completely fails. Oh. Yeah. And that is a fairly awkward thing to do, though we have got some tricks that we will be using as we go through, just to try and make that more of a reality. But that's the goal with Lugia here. The entire point of the deck is, let's try and make sure my opponent's got at least 6 cards in hand. Let's get 4 energy on turn 1, which really isn't that difficult. Not to give too much of the game away too early, but with a combination of Welder and Twin Energy here, we can get the 4 energy on without too much bother. So we're okay in that regard. And then we're just going to try and run through our opponent. Of course, one of the giant issues then becomes, well, what happens next? What happens, and it's generally when your opponent's taken a few prizes, as we'll see, what happens when my opponent is unable to be put to 6 cards or more in hand? What do I do then? And one of the things we've got here is Double V, and I love Double V. You see, Double V takes 30 less from attacks, so it's got an effective HP of 240, but more importantly, 120 damage for free energy, but remember with Welder it's quite easy to get the energy on, plus 30 more for each prize card your opponent has taken. So we can have a little bit of a seesaw going on here. You take a couple early prizes with Lugia, your opponent starts taking some prizes to get back in the game, and you finish off with double. Absolutely love it. If your opponent doesn't take a bunch of prizes, Lugia sweeps. If they do take a bunch of prizes, that's where Lugia gets a lot worse, but that's where double gets better. To put it another way, as Lugia gets worse, double gets better. I love that. I absolutely love it. Now, the other attacker we have here is Blacephalon. Now, we're playing Fire Energy because of Welder, and Blacephalon's awesome. You might as well. 1 Fire Energy for a GX attack. Discard one of your prize cards. If it's an energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. Really here, this is just taking a prize. You're down to 1 prize remaining. You don't take it, you discard it, but you still got 1 fewer to take to win the game. You're down to 1 prize card remaining, so all you do here is just discard it, and boom, you win the game. Job's a good one. Straight away. I love that. But it's still a fire Pokemon. You're still playing Fire Energy. You've still got Mind Blown, which lets you do 50 damage for each Fire Energy you lost zone, and you can lost zone as many Fire Energy as you like. So that's a nice little emergency attack, but also a GX attack, bearing in mind there is no other GX attack you're looking to use in this deck. And then the rest of the Pokemon here, it really is all down to extra consistency. We've got Eldegoss to grab a supporter card from your discard and put it into your hand. We've got Oricorio, lets you draw 3 cards if you had a Pokemon KO'd the previous turn, bearing in mind you're playing a largely single prize deck. You've got Dedenne to discard your entire hand and draw 6. You've got Crobat to let you draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. And you've got Jirachi to look at the top 5 cards of your deck if you're active, find a trainer card, put it in your hand, and free retreat with a skateboard. And you are really going for full bore consistency here. And you have to be going for full bore consistency. Because you're playing a weird combo deck. You're trying to get many things happening at once. You need to get all 4 energy on Lugia and get your opponent to have 6 cards in hand, or it becomes pointless. The entire deck relies on that. So yeah, you're playing a bunch of consistency cards, but you kind of have to or the deck falls apart. Now in terms of energy, you're playing 4 Twin Energy because colourless non-GX non-V Pokemon, and then you're playing 10 Fire Energy so you can accelerate them using Welder. And moving into the trainer line, it really is very simple. Get 4 energy on Lugia, get your opponent to have 6 cards in hand. That is all you're really trying to do here. Now in terms of getting the energy, I've mentioned it a couple times, but Welder is huge. If you attach a Twin Energy and then Welder to Fire Energy, that is all 4 energy on Lugia. Now that does mean you're playing Welder drawing free rather than playing something more aggressive, which is why we do play so many support Pokemon here to try and make it happen. We've also got Giant Half to search your Fire Energy from your deck. We're not playing stuff like Fire Crystal, because this, which gets it back from your discard, because this is a go fast, go early, smash kind of deck. This isn't a, hey, I'm going to recover a bit of energy in the mid to late game deck. No. This is an I will get rolling early and roll you deck. And if you don't get rolling early, you're not going to roll them, you might get rolled. Which is why we play Giant Half, but stuff that gets stuff from the discard pile, not loving it. Now, in terms of getting your opponent to 6 cards in hand, we got a couple of options. We play a full 4 copies of Reset Stamp. And the reason here is very simple. It makes your opponent shuffle their hand into their deck and draw a number of cards equal to their remaining prizes. Now, the thing is that your opponent is going to start with 6 prizes. So as long as your opponent hasn't taken a prize, this will put them to 6 cards in hand, Lugia will do 250 and you're good. And in the early game, this is going to be what you're trying to do. Play Reset Stamp, put your opponent to a 6-card hand, hit Lugia, and roll. Now that's not always going to work because, like I've said, as soon as your opponent starts taking prizes, this becomes worse and worse and worse, which is why we play Surprise Box. Love Surprise Box. Surprise Box comes along here and lets you put a card from your opponent's discard pile into their hand. So if your opponent has 5 prize cards remaining, you play Reset Stamp and Surprise Box, you're good. If they've got 4 prizes remaining, Reset Stamp and 2 Surprise Box, and you're good. You'll run out of Surprise Box very quickly, but the goal here is to try and take 1 or 2 prizes just using Reset Stamp in the early game, because you're so consistent, you're going to get the first couple KOs, and then your opponent takes a KO, you only need 1 Surprise Box, etc. But this is why we play Double to try and sweep in the late game. It's why we play Blacephalon to take our final cheeky prize. And the final prize will often be the most difficult one to take. Because you know what? In the early game, you're probably going to be okay, but you need an option for when it runs out. Now, the deck does actually play a copy of Jesse and James as well. Jesse and James is just a little bit of hand disruption. Both players discard 2 cards from their hand. It's just to try and stop your opponent setting up. Simple as that. And this is the deck, right? If your opponent doesn't set up, you will sweep. If you can get set up with Lugia, you put your opponent on a really short clock. And if your opponent doesn't start rolling now, you will just sweep with Lugia and win the game. They have got to get rolling super quickly to avoid that happening. Jesse and James is just an attempt to try and make sure that they don't set up, and that's kind of fun. Now, elsewhere, it's largely a bit more like we would expect. We do have a couple copies of Professor's Research to discard our hand, draw 7. It's fine as long as you don't need a Welder. If you need a Welder, it's bad. A copy of Boss's Orders to drag a Pokemon from your opponent's bench into their active. Again, if you need a Welder that turn, it's a bad thing, so fingers crossed you don't. 4 copies of Quick Ball, because we're playing an entirely basic deck here, and that searches out your basic Pokemon. 4 copies of Switch, because you need to make sure your Lugia's in the active ready to attack, and also so you can reuse Jirachi over and over. Speaking of Jirachi, couple copies of Escape Board as previously mentioned, and then 1 copy of Great Catcher. It drags a GX off the bench as long as you discard 2 cards from your hand, but like with Jesse and James, there are often going to be hands where you can just spare a couple of cards, because you are going overboard to try and get the early combo. This will allow you to take out Pokemon your opponent's building up on the bench. It will allow you to take out multiple prize Pokemon because few GXs have more than 250, just a few tag teams. And it's not a supporter, so you can play it on the same turn that you play a welder. I adore this deck. I have serious concerns that if you don't get enough early prizes, it will fizzle out. I have concerns that against big tag team decks, you're not going to take one-hit KOs and the deck will fizzle out. But also, any game where your opponent doesn't have a fast start, you will win. And even when they do have a fast start, if you can take a couple prizes before they do, then use Surprise Box to take a couple more and then sweep with Double, I love this deck. Will it be a powerhouse in the format going forward? No idea. Will it get you a bunch of cheeky wins when your opponent has even a mildly slow start? Oh yes it will, ladies and gentlemen. Yes it will. So I'd like to know what you think about this deck and how seriously you're taking it, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.